Hey Archery Talk, this is Lucas, and today I've got my long-term review of the Prime Nexus 2. Now the Nexus line is kind of brand new for Prime this year, so there's lots of changes to talk about, but before we do that, let's look into the specs. This bow has an axle-to-axle length of 32 inches, a brace height of 6 inches, and an IBO rated speed of 341 feet per second. The bow carries an MSRP of about $1,000, which it turns out is the least expensive of the flagship bows I'm testing this year. The most notable new change to the Nexus line this year is the new Nano Grip. Not just a regular grip. This thing actually has is NASA-designed Aerogel inside, and what that basically does for you is that it gets warmer the longer you hold it. So if you're out hunting on a cold November morning, you can just hold onto this grip, and instead of the aluminum riser like the prior year primes, and it just continues to kind of warm up your hand for you, or at least not get your hand any colder like it would holding the riser itself. It's very cool technology. It was designed by NASA kind of to protect astronauts from extreme heat and cold fluctuations. So if you figure if it's good enough for NASA, it's good enough for us bow hunters. The other changes made to the Nexus line versus the Black Series from last year are all about noise and vibration reduction. Now I shot the Black 3 last year and really loved it. I actually shot that in some tournaments. It was so freaking accurate, a great setup, but it was a little noisy. So Prime has solved that, or at least attempted to, by having lighter weight cams and lighter weight yoke rings. So Prime went to a whole different series of aluminum. They're using 7000 series aluminum on the cams now versus 6000. They dropped a bunch of weight from the yoke rings, and all that is designed to make the bow a little bit quieter after the shot. Now there still is some residual noise, which you're going to expect with any hunting bow, but it is definitely a step improved, at least in my opinion, over the Black Series. Speaking of the cams, there's actually a little bit more draw length range to these this year. Prime added 2 more inches of draw length adjustability. So this one here, for example, now goes from 23 to 30 inches. So 23 inches of draw length. That is really going to fit just about anybody. And if you need a little bit longer, if 30 inches is enough for you, you move up to one of the longer Nexus bows and you'll be good to go. Let's move on to the actual review of this bow, and we're going to start with draw cycle. As I mentioned in my 2021 hunting bow draw cycle video, the Nexus 2 is a little bit of a stiff pull. It's actually fairly light in the first part of the draw, but really builds up strong in the second half. It is quite a stiff feeling draw. I would say maybe it feels a little stiffer than you would expect out of a 70-pound hunting bow. Not to say it feels like a hyper-aggressive speed bow, because it doesn't have that dip into the valley. It's a very smooth and linear pull, just a little bit stiffer than I would like. Before the 2020 model year, all Prime hunting and target bows would come with limb and cable stops. They did away with that last year, and they've kept on with that this year. There's only cable stops available, and that's due, I think, largely to the rotating draw length module. There just wasn't room to have kind of the options for both setups. But truth be told, I prefer cable stops anyway. I just like how they feel. These ones feel like just, most of the other high-end cable stops I've tried with just a little bit of give, which is exactly what I like. But the nice thing about these ones is that you can move them. So if you can micro adjust your draw length, you can micro adjust your valley and your holding weight just by moving the limb stops in and out. It's a great system and really lets you fine tune how the bow feels for you. Now speaking of how the bow feels at full draw, I have been a longtime fanboy of how Prime bows shoot. As I mentioned earlier, the Black 3 is a bow I've actually shot in tournaments before. I just like how it feels. I would say I'm not quite as comfortable with the Nexus 2 for whatever reason, and I don't really know what that is, because the bows, realistically perform and look largely the same, but for whatever reason, the Black 3 just fit me like a glove, and maybe I'm not shooting the Nexus 2 quite as well as I am maybe 1 or 2 of the other bows I'm testing this year. A real feather in the cap for Prime is the price tag. As I mentioned, this bow is the least expensive of any I've tested this year at $1,000, which is still a lot of money, I understand, but for flagship level hunting bows, that's kind of where the prices start. And I think what makes it even more of a value is that the Prime offers free replacement strings and cables every 2 years for the original owner, and they even offer you a free tune-up within the first 6 months of your purchase. So if you're an archer who maybe doesn't have access to a bow press or whatever other tools they might need, and if you find your bow's not shooting quite as well as you'd like within the first, under less than 6 months that you have it, you're allowed to take it to your Prime dealer. They'll help you sort it all out, and it's all part of the Prime package. Bow hunters are big fans of figuring out how fast things are, and that's not going to change with this review. I set up the Nexus 2 with 70 pounds of draw weight and 30 3/8 inches of draw length, and I shot a 350 grain arrow through the chronograph and saw an average speed of 328 feet per second. That is a tie for the fastest of any of the bows I shot this year. Super impressive. It was actually a 3-way tie for the lead. I've never had that before. And using a heavier 477 grain arrow, the arrow I hunt with, I saw an average speed of 285 feet per second. So plenty of speed out of the Prime bow this year. In fact, probably more than I've seen in prior years. As for fit and finish, I am a fan of everything Prime has done, especially since they went over to the split limb system. I love the long riser. I just like their colors. The grizzly brown I had last year in the Black 3 is probably the best looking riser I've ever seen in my life. The green one they've sent me this year looks equally as good. It's flawless. They take a backseat to nobody when it comes to dialing in fit and finish on a bow. The bottom line is, if you want a bow that looks great, that shoots plenty fast, and is perfectly accurate, head to your local Prime dealer and take the Nexus 2 out for a little spin.